Good morning, everyone. That was a tremendous presentation. We've got to let everyone get sort of settled here, and we'll move along. Okay. Morning. Yeah. So, good morning. My name is Sandra Solin, and I am the Issues Manager and lead sort of lobbyist for the Northern Colorado Legislative Alliance. And it's wonderful to see you this morning and see such an incredible crowd. Thank you so much for that presentation. Fast, all kinds of information coming at us, but really sort of tells the story of where we are in Colorado, and really appreciate that information. We've had recent information that demonstrates that Colorado is in this sort of slowing trend, and our competitiveness has diminished in many respects, and that's a really key component for us as an NCLA as we look at our economic competitiveness and assurance that the policy that we drive in Colorado appropriately reflects the needs to maintain our economic health in Colorado. I have the distinct pleasure of moderating and leading a panel of some of our legislative leaders from the region, and so grateful for them to be here. We'll dive into that, and while I'm speaking, I might just invite those who are joining us. So Representative Andy Baisnaker, Senator Marchman, Representative-elect Lori Sander, Representative-elect Ryan Gonzalez, and Representative-elect Dan Woog to join us at the table. And I'll just make some introductory remarks to sort of set the stage for the conversation. And again, thank you all for being here. So I imagine many of you have such intrigue about what does this recent election mean for this upcoming legislative session? What were the implications of that, and how will we as an organization interface with this legislature as we move forward? In recent years, the NCLA has been in a slightly more defensive posture as a result of the significant Democrat majorities that we've had both in the Senate and the House, and our trifecta environment, of course, with our gubernatorial, our governor. And this recent election demonstrated a slight shift to more moderate landscape. Voters signaled some fatigue with the progressive, we believe, a fatigue with the progressive agenda and a desire for some moderation. That presents an opportunity to be slightly more optimistic from my perspective as it relates to the policy work that we do as an organization and our ability to work very productively with our legislators on the key issues in which we operate. Those are in the transportation sector, affordable housing, land use, water, labor, tax policy, and those things that truly drive our economic health in Colorado. And that is largely over the 30 years, or how many years, 33 years that the organization has been in existence, has been the driving mission of our organization and of our region. We're grateful for the opportunity to engage with the legislators in this region. We are very proud of the working relationship that we have with folks. And over all those years, the dynamic with legislators has been pretty remarkable. And Democrat and Republican legislators who've worked together in this region towards sort of that economic health. And while there are sometimes differences of opinion on some key issues, the way in which we collectively work towards common goals to drive, again, sort of a healthy economy really is unique for this region, and we appreciate the working relationship that we have with folks and sort of identifying areas of common interest to continue to drive that home. I wanted to highlight, we've got a couple of things here. We will have a conversation with our legislators, but before we jump into that, Senate President-elect James Coleman has a message for us. We invited him to join us today. He's unable to be here, but Senator Coleman was just elected by his caucus on the Senate side to be president of the Senate. I'm very encouraged by his future leadership and the way in which he sort of views and operates as a very pragmatic leader. And again, an opportunity. He has a strong sense of the business environment and the needs from a policy perspective. And so we're going to start off with a message from Senator Coleman, who couldn't be with us today, but wanted to say hello and give some thoughts to the process. So, Vanda.
Hey, everybody, this is State Senator James Coleman, representing Senate District 33 here in Denver, and your Colorado Senate President designee for the 75th General Assembly. I couldn't be there in person with you all today, but my good friend Sandra Hagen-Solon asked me to share a few words. I first want to start off with gratitude. Thank you to NCLA for being a champion for business, not only in Northern Colorado, but also across our entire great state. I'm blessed to serve here at the legislature with your senators and representatives on areas we all care about, like water resource development, labor and employment, community issues, and transportation. We're entering a tough budget year. There's a $1 billion deficit in the $16 billion general fund budget that needs to be accounted for in the upcoming budget year. With a return to normal population growth and inflation, Colorado can expect to continue to run into the Tabor cap, restricting growth while there's upward pressure from caseload growth and other increasing costs. This is an ongoing problem, and solutions in this year's budget need to be long-term solutions, not one-time. Driving factors behind the budget deficit are decreasing inflation, resulting in less growth of the Tabor cap compared to the last several years. The Tabor cap is determined by statewide inflation. However, the cost of goods and services government purchases have a higher inflation rate. Growing cash funds are also pushing out the amount of general fund available under the Tabor cap. Federal COVID-19 related funds are ending. Caseload increases in Medicaid, Department of Corrections, and K-12 education combined account for a $590 million increase for fiscal year 2025-26. And as you all know, Proposition 130's approval by the voters requires $350 million for local law enforcement, but has not been accounted for in any of the projections yet. The bottom line, the JBC and General Assembly will have to work closely with the executive branch to make strategic, targeted cuts while preserving the crucial state services that Colorado supports. It may be tough, but I'm confident we will get the job done. In Colorado, we do support regional collaboration to create clean water resource management strategies, to promote efforts to retain water in Northern Colorado, to protect the integrity of water law, and support increasing water storage available in Northern Colorado, as well as investing in transportation to improve our roads and mobilities for all. In Colorado, we advocate for legislative and regulatory change that allows for businesses to thrive with a keen focus on promoting the ability of a business to grow workforce. In Colorado, we address issues such as crime, homelessness, behavioral mental health, substance use, and housing affordability. In 2025, we will do our best to continue the same, improve where we can, and serve as a model to our country in other states. We will continue to partner with cities and counties and our federal delegation to codify policies and match funding for the greatest investment in our state. We look forward to partnering with you at Northern Colorado Legislative Alliance to positively impact the lives of all Coloradans. Together, we will show our country why Colorado is the best state, a state where everyone belongs. Thank you all for your time, and let's do this.
Let me share a little bit with regard to the dynamics of the House and the Senate. As I mentioned, we saw slight change in the landscape. On the House side, and for the last several years, we've had a supermajority in the House of Representatives. We saw a slight shift this election cycle. In fact, two of our members in Northern Colorado won some critical elections to reduce the supermajority by 2, such that you have Republicans sort of gained an additional 2 seats. That doesn't necessarily change the overall conversation, but the members that were elected within the Democrat caucus, I think we saw slightly more moderate individuals elected in that cycle. So that is an important consideration. Do we have that ready? And then on the Senate side, we saw a maintaining of the majority there, but again, some replacement of individuals who we will be working with closely, but not too much of a change there. So again, sort of going back to that sort of slightly more moderate shift for this next legislative session. So as you can see, we're blessed to have a wonderful leader in our upcoming legislative session. But as I noted, we're also blessed to have some fantastic leaders in Northern Colorado to work on the tough issues that face our region and our state. I'm going to invite the legislators to share 5 minutes of maybe 3 minutes, given our time, their thoughts on the upcoming legislative session, the priorities that you see for yourself, and as Senator Coleman noted, certainly some key issues that are unfolding here. But just 3 minutes to share your observations, what you see anticipated for the next legislative session, and then we'll dive into some more particular issues with some questions, and hopefully have a couple minutes for sort of some Q&A, a couple of questions from the audience as well. So Senator Marchman, I'll start with you.
Right. Let me just say thank you. Can you think like hello? Just everything. Thank you, and thank you for having. Sorry, I have my morning voice. Thank you for having me this morning. I'm Janice Marchman, State Senator from SD 15, so I represent Larimer and Boulder counties. I've lived in Loveland and have for 20 years, raised my family there, and I now teach there when I'm not in the legislature. So my main focus this year, we tend to get a bit siloed in the legislature, especially in key areas. Education is one of those areas. So as a teacher and a former school board member, I'm the vice chair of the Senate Education Committee. So a lot of my bills actually have a lot to do with education, youth mental health, youth physical health, and that kind of thing. So I'm primarily education. As I was looking at all my bills, they're mainly education. So I just know that's what I do. I'm going to spend 9 minutes now, because I probably spent an hour or a minute, talking about the budget. It is a structural deficit that we're dealing with due to overspending that has happened over the course of the last 6 years at least. We are asking departments to come with cuts, and they are coming with, we only raised our budget by 2% or 5%. Friends, I'm a math teacher, and that is not a cut. That's not a cut. And so we are not in a position, I will say right now, that the General Assembly feels like we are partnering with the departments to really make targeted cuts. So I hope you understand what I'm saying with that. I am attending all of the budget meetings just to hear it all. So we've got departmental requests coming in above, not as cuts. We've got the governor's request, and the thing that's most interesting here is the request around severance tax. There's about a $30 million cut that is being looked at for water projects based on the request that's come in. It's creative financing that the budget office has done, but I don't think it's going, I'm loath to take away money for water projects. It's our biggest expense. It's our biggest thing that we pay for each year in the legislature. We also have a huge backlog on the Frenchman bill, and they're asking to grow that department. Not sure about that. The third thing I'll talk about that I'm passing to my colleagues to the right is about appropriations. Ever since I've been in the legislature, it's only been 2 years, there's been money. We thought it was money, but there's been money to spend. So we're like, it's a tough year, but here's a $25 million project we're going to do. This year, we are literally running bills that are between $0 and maybe $2,000, $2,500. And trying to express that to our colleagues is a challenge. They're just not used to that. So I just want to kind of share that. So I'll stop there, but my mind's on the budget notes here. So thank you.
Please, yes, thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is State Representative Andrew Basenecker. I have the privilege of representing West and North Fort Collins in the state legislature. I've served in that capacity since 2021. So as you think of West Fort Collins, that is CSU, Old Town Fort Collins, all the way up to the Budweiser plant on I-25. I serve on the Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committee, and I also sit on the Appropriations Committee, which means it's going to be a tough year as bills with fiscal notes come before our committee. And I think, to my colleague's point, we're going to continue to need to make tough choices around priorities for our state and really make strategic investments where they can move the needle, but also hold the line on other things that might be great ideas and good policy, but quite frankly, there simply isn't the budget for it in this environment. I want to talk briefly about housing. It's what I've focused on since my time in the legislature. And so housing has been a continued priority. Appreciation to our state demographer's office for really highlighting the nexus between housing and population growth, and certainly the ability of folks to move between communities inside of Colorado. But also, I would say in my community, the ability to have flexibility on the housing continuum, meaning I believe that we need to build more housing, we need to build smaller housing, and we need to build housing where folks can upsize and downsize and hopefully have access to home ownership in a way that's not possible right now. I was recently a part of another panel and somebody asked the question, how do we get young people involved in the conversation around home ownership? And my answer was this: you have to let them believe that it's actually for them and something that they can achieve and attain in our communities. And that means building smaller footprint homes. It means looking at construction defects, certainly, to see what we can do to build condos in our communities. And it also means providing flexibility for communities to make different decisions around housing types. So I'll be bringing forward at least 3 housing bills this year. One, to work with the manufactured and modular housing industry to look what we can do to build to scale inside of that industry, noting that a lot of times those offer lower price points for home ownership for communities. I'll also have a bill that looks like what we can do to empower our faith communities, educational institutions, and public schools to build housing where they deem that to be a connection to their mission in our community. And last but not least, I'm also looking at a policy that would allow for apartment buildings to be built up to a certain height with a single stairway instead of multiple stairways. This allows for gentle density and the building of housing in places where currently it's not possible. So overall, I hope you hear a theme from me, and that is there is very much a need for a supply side solution to be able to drive down prices and help folks attain housing in our communities as they need it and as they certainly require it along their life cycle in our communities. So I really appreciate NCLA, the opportunity to be with you today, and I really look forward to working with my colleagues on these issues.
When you have the mic, we'll just go down the line. Introduce yourself.
All right, thank you, Sandra, and thank you, NCLA, for hosting us. My name is Lori Garcia-Sander. I'm representative-elect for House District 65. Welcome to House District 65. Winsong is in House District 65. House District 65 is Eaton, Severance, Timnath, Wellington, Windsor, a little bit of north part of Fort Collins, LaPorte, out to Bellevue. And a tiny bit of Johnstown. So it is in one of the big growth areas of northern Colorado. I just retired from 25 years in public education. 20 of those years were spent in Larimer County and Thompson and Poudre school districts, ended in Weld County at Alt Highland, RE9, and I still get to work one day a week as the Office of Civil Rights Compliance and ELD, ESL coordinator for the district. So I still have a foot in education. My husband and I live in Eaton. We have a small business in Nunn, and we have 200 apple tree orchard and property up in Red Feather. So our lives touch a lot of industry in Colorado. And as a freshman legislator, most of my bills will be around education policy and cleaning up things. But really, my priority is going to be making sure that we limit the overreach of government, making sure that we have decisions made at the most local levels possible. I know as a teacher, as a principal, I hated having CDE come in and say, now you have to, no you can't. When there were decisions that seemed like they should be made at the local level. And I just see that as kind of all areas of government. You know, are we making policies that are making people's lives better for their businesses, for their agriculture operation, for their school district? or are we making things more challenging? So my approach has always been to ask a lot of questions, to listen and learn, and ask more questions, and that's kind of where I'm coming from in working with my new colleagues. My assigned committees are education, health and human services, and appropriations, so I'll get to work with you a lot. So thank you for having us.
Well, hello and good morning to everybody. Thank you to everybody who put this together. Sandra, thank you. My name is Ryan Gonzalez, and I am the newly elected state representative for House District 50. House District 50 encompasses East Central Greeley, Garden City, and Evans. It is the only legislative seat that fully sits in Weld County, so I'm very fortunate to be able to obviously work only with Weld County. Not saying that there's anything bad with working with other counties, but it just makes my job a lot easier, obviously, right? And so I got into this because I grew up seeing obviously what's going on in our state. I have hope for this state, and there's a lot of work that we need to obviously push forward, right? The main issue that I've been hearing from voters, obviously connecting with people who send me here to do a job, is affordability. It's becoming too expensive. Well, of low income people I know, people I grew up with. I don't consider myself a middle income worker, middle class. Just obviously with everything that's going on, prices continue to skyrocket. Whether it's eggs, whether it's energy, whether it's property taxes, whether it's mortgages, people are hurting. Senior citizens who are on fixed income are hurting. They're seeing their rents go up. They're being forced to downsize. They're being forced to move out. And a lot of times, I was in the banking industry for 4 years, and I can tell you that during the pandemic and afterwards, people were leaving the state because they just can't afford it anymore. And it's sad that we are being pushed out of our home because simply we just can't afford it. We love Colorado. We know what it has to offer. And so, there's a lot to do in Colorado. I'm very blessed to be here. I am the child of immigrants. My mom was raised 3 kids on her own. She was also a domestic violence survivor, so I know a lot of these impacts of these policies that affect people of low income and people who just want to make a living. I got my education from the University of Northern Colorado in business, so business is one of my main focuses in this upcoming session. Let's make it easier to do business, right? Let's get rid of these excess regulations, these redundant regulations, and so some of my policies that I want to put forward is a periodic review of these regulations, sunset the terrible ones, the ones that obviously are redundant, and make sure we bring stakeholders to the table. I want to also make sure I defend the energy interests, Weld County, obviously oil and gas. We have clean oil and gas methods in Weld County, and I don't like what's going on in the legislature that they're obviously going after oil and gas because of environmental regulations, right? And so I feel like we need to make sure we bring stakeholders to the table who understand, who know the facts, right? Facts are important, and obviously, we want to make sure we have good energy prices, especially people that are affected of low income. And I really look forward to working with my colleagues on finding practical solutions, negotiating, and just making sure we represent the interests of the people. At the end of the day, I answer to the voters and the constituents of my district. They are my boss, and that is something that I will not forget as I embark in my first term. And I really look forward to seeing some sensible legislation that gets passed. And I was just told I will be sitting on the Energy and Environment Committee and the Finance Committee. So I'm sure some of you probably have some play and role in that. I look forward to working with you guys and having that dialogue because I really want to get Colorado back on track, and let's just make Colorado more affordable.
Thank you. I'm Dan Woog. I am representative-elect for House District 19. That's Firestone, Frederick, Dacono, Erie, a little bit of Longmont. And before I talk just really briefly about what I'm interested in the legislature, can we just, everyone that put this together, this is incredible. Can we give a hand? I mean, the food was great, the people here, so please, a hand. Truly an impressive group of people, impressive food, and it's a nice job everyone did. So just real briefly, I have a huge focus, as some of my counterparts do, on the cost of living here, crime, and it was mentioned, regulation. Some of us had another meeting yesterday with the Denver Chamber, and an unbiased study showed that Colorado is very high in the rate of regulation compared to many states in the U.S. I'm a former small business owner, and I actually sold my property management business, and a lot of it was due to the fact that so many laws in the past few years, even years past where I was a legislator, that I didn't agree with these laws, but laws were passed that hurt my business, and actually maybe the intention was good, but it made me increase my cost to my clients who were the property owners. I did a lot of single family rentals, but also the tenants. So there's a lot of things that happen. Many people say large government or growing government creates inflation, but also just the laws that come upon, as many know, businesses, and especially even small businesses, that force me to change the way I do business and force me to increase my costs, which of course gets passed on to the customer. So that's going to be a big focus for me. I also think we really need to focus on crime. I think Colorado, we talked that nice slide presentation. There's just the demographics here. I think we can improve a lot if we have a very friendly business environment, get rid of some of the regulation. I think that lowers the cost of living, makes it more enticing for people to live here. I think it makes it more enticing for businesses to come here because of that, but also, again, a lower crime rate, a safe place to live. So I think there's things we can focus on. I'm very hopeful that both parties can work across the aisle and focus on these things because a very good business environment will just be good for a state in so many ways. I grew up with my father who's an entrepreneur, my grandfather was an entrepreneur, my great-grandfather, my uncles. I'm just a business kind of guy, and I believe in the private sector. So I hope that we can work together and create some good laws and maybe make some changes to some laws that have affected businesses in a negative way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Sorry for the singular microphone. Well, as you can see, we've got some dynamic individuals who represent our region. There are included in this document is the listing of all of our legislators for Weld and Larimer counties with contact information. And again, we're grateful for the commitment to the region that you bring to your role. Let's talk about a couple of key issues that are important to the NCLA. We've touched on affordable housing, but we'd like to talk a little about construction defects and its role within the affordable housing equation, transportation, and then perhaps a little bit on land use. That was also touched on. Let's start on the construction defect side. Affordable housing, Representative Basenaker, you highlighted some of the key components and concerns about affordable housing, and certainly one of those from our perspective as an NCLA is construction defects, and it's the burden it has placed upon the ability of developers to actually build condos, and sort of those key entry points for wealth building for individuals. We're anticipating legislation this next legislative session. It failed last year. Any thoughts, perhaps, maybe I'll start with you, Representative Basenaker, to talk about the construction defects piece and others who might want to weigh into that policy and the opportunity that may exist this next session to really dive into this issue.
Sure. Yep, thank you. I think it's an important conversation. So a couple things to think about. There was a bill last year that didn't make it through committee. My understanding is as well there's going to be a bill this year. My perspective is simply this. The state legislature can set the table in terms of an environment that is conducive to building more condos in our state, right? And that looks like a lot of different reform pieces. Perhaps it's allowing a reasonable right to remedy an issue that you find inside of construction, raising the threshold at which a group of residents or homeowners can bring litigation. These things are all very helpful, right? And I think it's something to consider. I think the piece that was missing from last year's bill that I'm keenly dialed in on and interested in is some measure of confidence from our insurance friends to understand that if we pull certain policy levers, that we create a market environment that will allow them to offer a product to our builders to build more construction in the condo space. I think that's really helpful. But then I think you need to dial down past that even a little further to say, as a driver, I know that my insurance rates are uniquely tied to my safety on the roadway. And so if we have developers and builders who are building good product time and time again, I would like to see those folks, quite frankly, pay less insurance rates than some folks who perhaps have more challenges in that condo construction space. And if we can set the table in an appropriate way, and then really, I think, put pressure on our insurance friends to be able to say that if we do these things, if we pull these policy levers as a state, that you will see, one, a market environment that's more favorable to this insurance product, but also that we will work with individual developers to be able to offer an affordable product, and that goes all the way down to the subcontractors on these projects, right? That's what I would like to see in terms of a measure of confidence, but I also think it's a couple years out, right? Even if we do all these things at the state, it's going to take some time for these policies to take effect, and so to hold the course, but also to make sure that we are charting the correct course is really where my mind is at as we look at construction defect.
Anyone else wish to comment on that issue?
Excuse me.
Thank you. Very well said. I just wanted to add that yes, Representative Byrd, I believe, is running it again. And I threw a Hail Mary to the Realtors Association yesterday. I'm hoping to get on that bill. I don't know if there's a House member yet along with her, but I'm hopeful to be on that with her. But yeah, we need to get that moving. It will take a little time, but it's gotta happen. It's a necessity. I have 2 young children, and the reality is, with housing prices, I don't know that they will be able to live here after high school. So that's just a major focus for me, and I think that'd be a great help to get that moving.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, the affordability piece and the ability, and I think that the tie and linkage to the demographic report, and certainly earlier this week there was CU did their report, and I'll put a plug in for the BizWest session on January 10th where there'll be an economic analysis. But the affordability piece has a direct correlation to our ability to have a labor pool for job growth there and our competitiveness. We're declining in that regard, and it's so critical, and it's one important, construction defects is certainly one critical piece of the equation. So thank you for that dialogue. The other issue that is super important to the NCLA over all these years, and appreciate the work that we've done collectively, is around transportation. And last year at this time, we opened up the segments 5 through 8 and on North I-25, which was truly super important. We have continued work to do on segment 4, which is south of Longmont. And I know Representative Basenecker and I have talked about the pinch that will happen if we don't expand to 3 lanes, and there's true safety concerns. So there's that one piece, as well as the regional corridors back and forth between Larimer and Weld County. The slide with regard to the movement between Larimer and Weld County and through the region highlights the importance of really identifying the challenges and the opportunities that exist there in 34 and the like. One of the concerns we have as an NCLA is assuring that there continues to be a balanced investment with regard to the transportation modes. And we've seen a slight shift to an overemphasis, from our perspective, on transit and other multi-modes versus continued investment in the roadway side. And we're strong advocates for a balanced investment. Any thoughts that any of you might have with regard to, now granted, there's a funding challenge and shortfalls, of course, and we recognize that. But it's also about setting the right tone for when dollars are available in the priority setting. Any thoughts that any of you might have with regard to that transportation piece?
Yeah, and I appreciate that question. Being a commuter who goes from Loveland down to Denver, I actually got in touch with CDOT after because they're doing their process of construction, and it is very unsafe. And of course, they pointed me to a website, so that was cool. Yeah, so I will highlight that the governor's budget request does call for keeping municipalities and counties whole, as there's a creative way of messing with fees. It's another creative financing budget kind of option, but I was very keen on making sure that the funding to counties and municipalities stayed the same, and it did. So there was just a budget meeting yesterday from CDOT, and so anyway, I do think it needs to be balanced. I have a question into the department. Given the change at the federal level, what kind of dollars related to transit are not going to be available? It's very possible that they're not available. And so then how much are we on the line for? What's our liability at this point? And how do we responsibly move forward in the absence of that funding, if that were the case? Yeah, that's kind of my thinking.
Others?
So, team here outside of Winsong is a big topic in my district. It's perennially coming up as one of the most dangerous highways in Colorado, and not a lot of money is going to it. There's lots of conversation around who's responsible for which section of the highway, and it's really from Mulberry, Fort Collins, all the way out to Sterling. And this is a highly trafficked road, obviously with all the buildings, new houses, lots of commuters. And so, yeah, I guess, like I said, I will always listen and learn and ask questions. And my big questions are coming into appropriations are, kind of how I manage my checkbook at home. Do we have the money for what we want? And if we don't have the money, where are we going to find the money, and what are we going to cut in order to pay for what we want? And so I'm coming at this with a lot of questions around where's the money coming from, where has it been allocated? I don't necessarily need a new bike path between Alt and Fort Collins, but I do need my potholes fixed. So that's going to be where I'm coming from coming up this legislative session. It's going to be really helpful for all of you to be vocal at the Capitol with some of those infrastructural priorities this year.
Yeah, thank you. And I completely agree. Less for us in Northern Colorado, less focus on mass transit, more on the roads. It's a priority. I'm hoping some of this can be the squeaky wheel. And we're going to need to continue to do that. Obviously, it seems like this has been going on, and there's never funding, but it has to happen. It's actually dangerous in areas. A lot of roads are absolutely horrible. I live on Highway 52 in Frederick, and if you don't have a truck, you're in trouble. I mean, it's narrow. It's a dangerous road, but there's also potholes everywhere. That's just one of many. So, like you said, the interstate has issues too. So, I definitely will be a squeaky wheel along with anyone that wants to join me. And I'm just appointed to the Transportation Committee as well. So happy to talk to anyone that has ideas or just wants to talk to me about that. So.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. Look forward to working with you on that. And as you all know, the investment that the NCLA has made with regard to transportation, particularly the I-25 corridor, is key. And so we want to ensure that that investment and the continued regional investments are not thwarted as a consequence of lack of action. Land use, local control, there's been a lot of conversation in the last couple of years around land use, and actually it intersects with the transportation conversation and densities and so forth. There has been a lot of conversation. What is the expectation from your perspective on what we may see this year after some small sort of changes that were made last year? We saw some movement, if you will, in that space last year after a large failed effort in the year prior. What are you expecting to see, perhaps, with regard to land use and then the local control issue? Representative-elect Sandra, you mentioned sort of local control as a piece of it. It is a concern of ours as an NCLA, just generally sort of keeping tabs of those issues. Any thoughts on those key pieces? Any of you? Yeah, jump on in there.
I can maybe get us started. Appreciate it. And a lot of times those land use conversations have centered around the issue of housing, just to be sort of dialing in on this a little further, right? Where can we build housing? Where are there barriers at the local level? And I say barriers with full respect and, quite frankly, admiration for the work that our local governments do day in and day out. You know, I also work, my district is served by a home rule municipality, so obviously local control is a shared value. And I also think it's important to pull out a little bit, specifically on the issue of housing, and recognize that what one municipality does or what one county does not happen in a silo. And when we take action at the local level, ultimately there are statewide impacts to those actions. And we saw that with growth caps that were in place until 2 years ago. When a growth cap is put in place, ultimately what you see is surrounding housing prices in neighboring jurisdictions tend to go up, oftentimes well past the point of what the value of that home should actually be. So for me, it's always about balance, right? Understanding where there is a mix of statewide and local concern. When we look at the charts that the state demographer gave us, and when we realize that we're hundreds of thousands units short in terms of housing, I think it's important to maintain that dialogue with our local governments to understand where can the state actually be helpful in providing more predictability, certainly in terms of housing, to be able to bring a project to the table and to fruition. And ultimately, if our environment is such that you have a patchwork of local regulations that negatively impact the ability of a developer to work across our state, I'm not sure that's favorable in terms of what we're looking at for more housing in our communities. So that balance of statewide and local control, I think, is always forefront, but there are times, quite frankly, where I think the state can be helpful to move that conversation forward, supporting our local governments with a shared concern for affordable housing.
Kind of what he was echoing. We obviously want to make sure we bring all the stakeholders to the table, right? So local governments, more autonomy and control, obviously jurisdiction of the areas, as well as the private sector, right? So when it comes to land use, making sure what's feasible, what are we able to do long-term versus short-term, but also make sure that we don't do a one-size-fits-all approach, right? So what works in Denver may not work in Will County, what works in Will County may not work in Boulder County, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to obviously make sure we think carefully about these things and bring the stakeholders to the table, which is why I will do is with the Greeley Evans in my district, making sure I bring those local voices to the table to see what works and what we're able to do realistically. Obviously, with the budget shortfall, we want to make sure that we're not obviously making the prices of everything go up. So that's something I look forward to when it comes to land uses. Obviously, eminent domain is another issue, a part of that, but we want to make sure that we keep a balance between, affordable housing and what the cities need.
I was just going to add, I had a meeting with the Loveland Housing Authority last month, and they were talking about all the money that was set aside for, in particular, transportation, transit-oriented developments. It was a big bill last year, part of the, I almost had PTSD as you start talking 2013. But they were asking if Loveland would be able to access this money. What I don't like about these bills that come in front of us is the overreach of the local control, but also it carves out people who could be getting money to basically make it only certain communities through Colorado get the money. And so, yes, this money, the transit-oriented development money, if any municipalities in Wilder Lurler decide to create what's called neighborhood centers, which I think is, anyway, doable, but not terribly expensive, you create those, then you would be eligible for that TOD money as well. So I just wanted to highlight that piece, but that's why I don't really like them. They don't feel it's a statewide problem that we are targeting. They carve out all of the rural, state. So anyway, that's just my thinking.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. And appreciate the specific mention of the various facets that really do intersect under land use, housing, transportation, transit-oriented development. All of these pieces really intersect. And it's an evolving conversation with regard to local control, I know. And so appreciate the opportunity to visit about that a little bit further. One other topic I wanted to explore with you all was in the area of labor issues. Colorado has had in place the Colorado Labor Peace Act for many, many years. It's a pretty balanced approach to the way in which labor unions can engage with businesses to present opportunities for unionization within the businesses. There will be an effort this upcoming legislative session on part of labor to make changes to that to, from their perspective, ease those conversations for unionization within businesses. And I'm just curious if you all have given some thought, sort of pre-thought to that dialogue as you've heard perhaps information coming from those various advocates and your general sense. And we as an organization haven't seen the specific policy. We are aware of the conversation and we'll have a formal position as the legislature unfolds, but I'd be curious your thoughts with regard to that policy.
Thanks for that. So we haven't seen the bill either. And I think it's a very small policy. I think it's literally striking something, just the second, and it gets into the second vote. So that it's, I think in general it's not, but the fact that we haven't seen it is a bit of a problem. I can tell you that the union efforts in past years had not been successful due to the executive branch, and I have heard that that is the same case for this. So I do believe, I was with, we were having dinner last night, talking to the restaurateurs in Loveland, and they were talking about this as being one of their three biggest issues with just keeping their doors open and expanding in terms of independence. So while we need to protect our workers, some of these policies that have been put in place are in fact hurting. They were talking about how back of the house is not getting what they should because of the tip wage. So anyway, there's a lot that we need to do. I know the ag industry is also dealing with, I'm on the ag committee, and that's another area that we're dealing with some issues around organized labor and ag. And so you'll see things like that. And I guess my whole point is I don't know that they have a path to be signed into law. That's just my take. I guess I'll just take the approach that I think we need to make sure we have all the stakeholders at the table, and that we get the advocates for those issues down to testify. I think so often the legislature passes laws that are really well intended. They're trying to make life better for people. They're trying to do the right thing, and they don't think out beyond what the ripple effects are, which is what we heard last night with the restaurateurs around, some of the laws that have been passed and made it difficult for them to keep a restaurant open and to make a fair wage for themselves. And so, I think what's really important is that we make sure we listen to our stakeholders, and that you're all local, again, down at the legislature, and that I'll be asking them questions. What are the ripple effects? How does this affect, there's 5 questions, and then, that you keep asking, how is this going to affect the people that we're trying to help?
Good. Others? Okay. Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you all. Thank you all. Well, we are almost at time. So grateful, again, for the conversation, the dialogue. Looking very forward to working with you all this next legislative session. Representative-elect Zander, you mentioned sort of the engagement and the stakeholders. And this is an opportunity to encourage your continued awareness, involvement, and engagement with the legislative process. Each of our legislators in Northern Colorado love hearing from individuals to gain your unique expertise and experience and perspective that they might not otherwise understand. And so I highly encourage your involvement. As an NCLA, we have developed a number of tools to help your engagement. So I highly encourage your going to the ncla.biz website to sort of follow the developments through the legislative process and find ways in which you can engage. Again, we have phone numbers and contact information for each of these individuals on your sheet. That information will also be available on our website. So really encourage that. There's a lot of really key issues that are facing Colorado, and economic competitiveness, I think, will be a theme that we as a business community, not only as an NCLA, but our partners will be really driving home this year, and based upon the economic information we're continuing to see. And again, some of the fatigue that we saw with some of the overreach and perhaps the lack of consideration for unintended consequences beyond some of these pieces. So that will be a critical piece for us as we look and as we engage in the next legislative session. Again, so incredibly grateful for all of you, and thanks for the opportunity to visit with you and share your thoughts on various issues. Thank you.